Okay, picking up with video 3 for chapter 4 on carbon and molecular diversity of life, we need to talk about some chemical groups that are going to be key in how some of these biological molecules function. So um, these little small chemical groups are going to be very distinctive in the properties that they lend to the overall function of the molecule. So we talked about the carbon skeleton being very important in how these molecules function and what they're able to do, but we also need to talk about some groups that are attached off of those carbon skeletons. We call those groups functional groups. Functional groups are components of organic molecules that are commonly involved in chemical reactions. We see a large number and arrangement of functional groups. They will give they'll give that substance or that compound a very distinct or unique property. Here we've got a hydroxyl group coming off, so this is a hydroxyl functional group. We'll see, you've probably heard of things like hydroxyls, carboxyls, esters, methyls, that sort of stuff, and that's what I'm referring to. That's what I'm talking about here. There are 7 functional groups that are most common and the most important when we talk about the chemistry of life. I want you to go back into your textbook and dig these out. I want you to know what a hydroxyl group looks like, so you should be able to draw a hydroxyl group. And then I just want you to pick out one key feature. We're not going to do any major chemistry here. My whole point for you going back and looking at those is so that you have an idea and can basically recognize them. We'll talk a lot about hydroxyl groups when we talk about pH. We'll talk a lot about amino groups when we talk about amino acids. Methylation will become an issue, and phosphate groups will become an issue when we talk about nucleic acids. So those are probably the biggest ones we'll talk about. We'll grab some of the others, but if you could just take a look in your textbook and get just some quick jotted notes on each of these 7, that would be really helpful as a reference for you in the future. I need to move on to ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Yes, that is a term you should know how to spell and spell appropriately. It's also one you should be able to say. ATP is the primary energy source for cells. It is the currency. It is the energy money of cells, and it consists of an organic molecule called adenosine. Okay, so right here, this is adenosine. Adenosine is attached to a group. It's attached to this ribose sugar. This is my carbons in a ring. So I've got this ring up here, actually 2 rings with carbon. Here's another ring in a sugar format. And then I have this phosphate, 3 of them specifically. 1 phosphate group, 2 phosphate group, 3 phosphate groups. I have 3 phosphate groups coming off in a chain. So adenosine, 1, 2, 3, triphosphate. And adenosine triphosphate is really important in that we use it as energy. So what ends up happening is we have ATP. We're going to have water come along. Water is going to result in a hydrolysis. Hydrolysis, if you need to spell that out, but a hydrolysis reaction. We're going to break this bond. We're going to break this bond between this outer phosphate group and the next phosphate group. And by severing that bond, we're going to create ADP and an inorganic phosphate, and we're going to release energy. We're going to release energy that was liberated when we broke the bond. Okay. We can break another bond. We can take this ADP and break another bond and make AMP, adenosine monophosphate. The interesting thing about this is that with each successive chemical bond breakage, we get a little less energy. So bang for buck, I'm going to get the most energy by liberating this third group, this third phosphate group. I'll still get energy, but I'll get a little bit less when I liberate the second phosphate group from ADP. So we'll do a quick review here, and that'll wrap up Chapter 4, and then I believe we'll jump into Chapter 5. So what I want you to remember is that I've got a lot of versatility in carbon. It's that carbon skeleton, how it's structured and put together, that makes a huge variation in our organic molecules. That we also get variation from the functional groups that are attaching to those chains. And then we'll pick up in Chapter 5 and we'll actually look at the macromolecules of life. So we're going to look at, that's where we're headed next. We're going to look at the 4 major macromolecules of life. So we'll take a break here and we'll pick back up with Chapter 5.